If you are into thought-provoking satire with just epic themes wrapped in humor and stories where gods walk, or you could say crawl among us, then today's book just might be for you. Today, I will be reviewing Small Gods by Terry Pratchett. Welcome to Spencer Reads Everything. I'm your host, Spencer Duncan, and we are taking a look at another one of the Discworld books, possibly the most famous, almost definitely the most quoted standalone. It is a juggernaut of a work in many ways, and I think it might be my favorite. I don't know, I say that on almost every one of these videos, but there is so much good stuff in this one. I will say from the get-go that it is a very blatant and at times rather sharp criticism of not just organized religion, but of just belief in general. I think that it can be very valuable for someone that is open-minded and wants to explore, especially in this satirical, comical way, ideas about religion, the creation of religion, what makes religion so potent, and what, of course, are some of the pitfalls of religion. Although that could certainly rub some people the wrong way, I hope that you're willing to give this book a try. As I've said in my other reviews for Discworld books, I do give away the plot because one of the big things that I'm making these videos for is for my own summary and my own memory, and for that reason I will go ahead and give you a spoiler alert. But let's talk about this. Small Gods is, of course, one of Terry Pratchett's Discworld novels. It is renowned for this blending of sharp wit with his deep and reflective storytelling. It is set in a fictional world, not just in Discworld, but it actually is going to go far back in time, and it is going to explore all of these different concepts of belief and institutional power and, of course, personal faith. This one in particular takes place on Omnia, which is a theocracy where the story unfolds. This is not a place that you see referenced a ton in the other Discworld books. Similar to Pyramids, it is an ancient civilization that seems to be pretty much a standalone series, although you will see some references here and there in the other books, but this is by and large meant to be a standalone commentary on the founding and ancient lore of Discworld. Omnia, where this book takes place, is governed by the strict adherence to the 7 books of the prophets of hence the name Omnia, and they of course are known collectively as the Septateuch, which is a very blatant reference to the Septuagint, a Greek translation of the Old Testament. And interestingly, while the Discworld is flat and orbited by its sun, Omnian doctrine insists that the world is round and revolves around the sun, of course illustrating some of the issues of dogmatism and belief systems and just how they might interact with other belief systems, be that religious or scientific, and a clear criticism of when people, of course, believed the earth to be flat, because, you know, nobody believes that anymore. And, of course, ideas of the heliocentric or the herocentric world, which, you know, was obviously a big part of the early scientific revolution. Of course, the story centers on who is a once powerful god, now trapped in the body of a powerless tortoise. And as the time approaches for the emergence of his 8th prophet, struggles to regain his divine influence. He actually encounters Brutha, a novice with an eidetic memory, who is the only one who can actually hear Om's voice, which is showing his own lack of power, something that seems to be contrary to the concept of divinity, and again, a part of this larger conversation. Brutha's journey begins when he is chosen by Vorbis, who is the head of the feared Quinzition, for a diplomatic mission to Ephebe. However, Vorbis is revealed to be quite ruthless and is actually manipulating events so that the death of Brother Murdoch is used to actually justify going to war. And so Brutha, who initially starts as obedient and somewhat unthinking, begins to evolve after discovering Ephebe's philosophers who challenge very conventional beliefs. And so one of the most poignant scenes takes place in the Great Library of Ephebe, where realizes that Brutha is his sole true believer. And the library becomes a critical site where knowledge is then threatened by Vorbis's orders to burn it. And Brutha refuses to let knowledge be lost. And so, of course, remember, Brutha has this photographic memory, begins memorizing the scrolls as, you know, the fire, as the library is being engulfed. And so you have this moment where you're seeing a real clash of just dogma, but also, you know, this moment of enlightenment. They are then going to flee in Ern's steam-powered boat after escaping from Ephebi, and Brutha and Alm are going to continue to face a variety of hardships, particularly in the harsh desert that they're in. They encounter forsaken temples of forgotten gods and Saint Ugilint, who is a hermit who worships these small gods. And then, of course, Alm's journey through the desert marks his realization of his dependence on believers, sparking a real shift in his attitude. And then back in Omnia, Verby's ambition peaks as he declares himself the 8th prophet, and trying to silence dissent, he appoints Brutha as archbishop. Of course, Brutha is much more courageous than that and sees what it is. It's an effort to silence Brutha. So he actually interrupts the ordination only to be sentenced to death, in which point intervenes dramatically, killing Vorbis in front of the crowd and renewing their belief in and restoring his power. So it both shows this moment of renewed belief in him, but also shows how often that is closely associated with very dramatic and deadly events. This is just rich with all sorts of commentary. I mean, Pratchett, he masterfully critiques religious institutions and, of course, the use of power through the characters of Alm and Brutha, and giving very different approaches, this idea of Brutha becoming more and more aware of consciousness and how to think about things and being a little more critical, and of course Alm becoming aware of the fact that his whole power is derived from whether people believe in him, which is one of the things that requires such dramatic events like the killing of Vorbis. Those are the types of things that are certainly going to be criticizing religion as a whole. And of course, you know, the idea of God's gaining strength from genuine belief as opposed to some kind of fear or blind allegiance, which also underscores that narrative. And so this interactions between Alm and Brutha, I mean, that's the most important relationship between it, but just all throughout you're having all these other tangential relationships that is trying to give you a concept of how you could satirically regard the origins of religions. So much is there in that respect, and just how much that could be tied into a larger commentary on just society as a whole and the role religion plays, and just how challenging it can be to fully understand the historicity of religious movements and how we should be in the present be understanding and interpreting that history. Let me give you just some of my favorite quotes in no particular order. I really enjoyed them. Some I think are very funny, and then some I think are, of course, very poignant and a very valid criticism. He says, "Gods like to see an atheist around, gives them something to aim at." What's a philosopher, said Brutha. Someone who's bright enough to find a job with no heavy lifting, said a voice in his head. Just because you can explain it doesn't mean it's not still a miracle. I really enjoy that one. I think that that's a very valid commentary on our perception of miracles and, of course, the interaction between miracles and science. But it's my personal opinion. Gods don't like people not doing much work. People who aren't busy all the time might start to think. The trouble was that he was talking in philosophy, but they were listening in gibberish. I love that line. I think that's such a good understanding and explanation of just challenges of communication, especially when it comes to thoughts that, you know, just it might take a little more thinking or a little more effort to fully appreciate. We are here, and it is now, the way I see it. After that, everything tends towards guesswork. Of course, some funnier ones. Gravity is a habit that is hard to shake off. Thou shalt not submit thy God to market forces. Belief shifts. People start out believing in the God and end up believing in the structure. I think that's a fair commentary on organized religion. I think, he said, if you want thousands, you have to fight for one. I like that one. That one I think is very profound. There's no point in believing in things that exist. Whew. That is a powerful comment on what belief is and how that should be engaging with the difference between belief and pure perceptual intake. And that's such a good, and that's one to chew on for a while. I mean, I think all of these quotes do a great job in both capturing the type of writing that it is, the humor that's there, but also I think just how profound conversations about religion and society can be found in this work. I think Terry Pratchett does such a good job, and I think this is, I really do think this is probably the best book in the series. So who would I say this book is for? Well, I would certainly say that this is a book for anyone that's curious about Discworld. They don't know if they're going to read it all, and so they just want to get the best ones. This is a great one. Of course, you already have to be willing to be interested in this type of discussion and recognize that this is going to be critical of religion. I do think it also gives a fair amount of commentary and stuff to believe in, or at least room to recognize why people want to have faith or want to believe in gods, which I think that is incredibly important. But there is also a fair amount of criticism there in the approach. I would say this is for anyone that is just looking for something a little different when it comes to a discussion of fantasy. I think this goes a long way in being distinct. Discworld is in and of itself already distinct, but I think this book is very different. It's not the first time there's a mention of gods, and there is always this kind of comical understanding of what exactly gods are, but this is the only one I feel like that really dives into exactly what it means to be a god and what kind of role gods play in Discworld. And I think that that's a very valuable conversation and narrative to have. Who would I not say this is for? Well, certainly anybody that is just not interested in fantasy or the satirical element that would characterize Discworld. I also wouldn't recommend this as the first Discworld book you read if you think you're going to read all of it, or at least a significant portion of it. I think it's so good, and I wouldn't start with this one. I do also think that having read the other books, and even though they're technically disconnected, at least in terms of characters, I still think it would be helpful to read some of the other books first, just to have a better appreciation of what Discworld is before you dive into this one. At least that's my opinion. People may have a different opinion on that. But I also would not recommend this for people that think that this type of question around deity and belief and religion is just not for them. And that's fine too. I could certainly see why you may not want to have this conversation. And so this book would not be for you. But I would love to hear what you guys have to say about this book. Is it your favorite Discworld book, or am I hyping it up too much? I don't know. Please let me know in the comments what you think about this one. Of course, don't forget to like, subscribe, turn on those notifications, and until next time, keep those pages turning.